So you were actually in high school, and you were in the 10th grade. I think whenever they had was got shut down Little Rock High School, is that?
No, that's when the integration thing started, when I was in the 10th grade. And I was going to Little Rock Tech High, but my girlfriend was going over at Little Rock Central. And so I went and transferred from Little Rock Tech High over to Central High. And that was the year that they closed the school down. And when they closed the school down, everybody that was at Central went to different schools like Rainy High, North Little Rock, Mapleville, Bill P. Robinson, and went all around to all different schools. I couldn't go because I didn't have good enough grades to go, because the only way I got to go to Central is I was having to take DE. It was either DE or DO, I'm not sure what it is.
What does that mean?
And that means you work a half a day and you go to school a half a day.
Right.
And that gives you credit. It's a whole day, but you have to work, get a job, doing something. Usually getting a stock boy in one of them for J.C. Penney's or Black's department stores or things like that. Ben did the same thing when he was in school. And anyway, I couldn't go back to Little Rock Tech High because in order to be able to go to Central, I had to burn my bridges at Little Rock Tech. And I was too proud to go ask permission to come back to Little Rock Tech. And which I could have done if I'd wanted to. But I was too proud to admit that I had screwed up. And so that's when I decided I'd just go in the Air Force and finish it through GED.
How old were you when you went in the Air Force?
I was 18. I went in January the 2nd.
Well, you went to the Navy first, though, right?
I was in the Navy Reserve. I'd been in the Navy Reserve for a year.
So
I went in the Navy Reserve when I turned 17.
And that's when they sent you down to San Diego?
That's when I went to San Diego. Boot camp, me and Bill Rayleigh, and we was part of I think they call the 8th Naval District or something like that. And we went through the boot camp down there at San Diego, and then we come back, and that's where I got my tattoo, was San Diego, Painless Nail.
Now your tattoo, you actually have a tattoo over your original tattoo, didn't you?
No, that was the only tattoo that I ever had.
Well, I thought you had a tattoo that you did to cover up another tattoo.
No, mine was a tattoo that there was put on a painless nail, $3.50. That's what it costs there at San Diego down at the end of Markham Street. And anyway, me and Bill Rayleigh both got one. And then we come back to Little Rock, and we was in the reserves once a month. We'd have to go in, for training or whatever you want to call it. Show up at the Naval Reserve place there on Fair Park Boulevard. And anyway, in November of that year, that was when schools had closed up. Well, I went and talked to the Air Force about going in the Air Force, and they said if I would get a release from the Navy Reserve, they would take me in the Air Force. So I went back out to the naval base, naval station there in Little Rock, and seen Commander Everhart, and told him what I wanted to do, and he got all pissed because I was wanting to go in the Air Force. And he said, yeah, he'd release me. And so he released me, and I just got all my booster shots and everything. And which, technically speaking, I wouldn't have had to get any shots in the Air Force. but they wouldn't give me my shot record. And then that was just as I got all the booster shots just before I went into the Air Force. It was when the Navy released me. They released me one day in the Air Force, picked me up the next, something like that. And then on January the 2nd is when I went in the Air Force, and I went down to Lackland, January the 2nd of '59. And my arm was still sore from getting all the blamed shots from the Navy, and I tried to tell them I just got through getting all my booster shots and everything, and the Air Force said, well, they was going to give them to me again, and I had to take all them shots again. I don't remember how many it was, but I know it was an armful. Both arms was full. And that's the way I went in the Air Force. And
Did you have to go all the way through basic training again?
well, yeah, I had the basic training. I went, well, I say all the time, I spent a month there at Lackland Air Force Base, and then left there and got sent to Amarillo. And that's where we finished our basic training and then started our jet school there. And I was in the 43rd Squadron at Amarillo. And between the time we got there and the time I started school, we had a place that we stayed at a squadron that was called PADS. And PADS was kind of like a transit squadron. They hadn't had any school. They didn't have any slots open for the school because there was a bunch of National Guardsmen come in there, and they had priority to go before the regular Air Force did.
Right.
And boy, you really ticked a bunch of us off. So they had us out there pulling KP and cleaning up ballparks and
AFI.
Huh?
AFI.
Well, whatever it was. And meanwhile, we was also finishing our basic training there in Amarillo. And then finally we got into school. I think it was about 2 weeks or something like that before we got into school. And school was 10 weeks. And then we had channelization. And you channelized in the school, we was training on the F-100, and then after we finished school, then we went through what they call channelization, and we channelized for I think it was 2 weeks, and I channelized on the 100, and then I channelized on the 102, which the 102 was same as the 100. It's just except the 102 was a delta wing and the 100 was a conventional wing. And we did that one, and then we finished that, and I was waiting on orders to ship out. And none of my class had shipped out yet. We'd all done the same thing. And then I had a chance to go channelize on the 101, which that was a multi-engine, twin engine, but still had the J57 engine in it. And it was just 2 of everything instead of 1. The 100, the 101, and the 102 all had the same identical engine. In fact, the J57 was wound up in the B-57 Canberra, the KC-135 had J-57s on it, and I believe the first B-52s had J-57s.
A lot of them.
But anyway, that was the most popular engine, and it was a simple engine, and it was a good engine. Except the afterburner on the 100 was causing problems, and they wind up taking the afterburner off from a 102 and putting it on a 100. And I don't know what the difference was, but it worked out good. And that put the 100 back on the first on the list, or the top thing. And then we went to crew chief school, studying, training to be a crew chief, and then they had brought the 104s in there, and we was in there kind of familiarizing ourselves with the 104. We hadn't actually started training on them yet, but they had brought them in there for us to, look at them and see what they was. They had brought one in there and had it up on stands, and that's where I got hurt, was on the 101.
104?
And,
You mean 104?
I mean on the 104.
What happened? Did someone pop it?
Well, I was underneath the aircraft looking at the things that I was supposed to be checking at, and there was a guy sitting in the cockpit. They had the AP unit hooked up to it, and it had the gear folded up on it. And he dropped the gear, and the gear on the 104 comes down in a hurry, a big hurry. And it hit me in the small of the back and knocked me across the hangar. And I centered a stand that a 100 was sitting on, centered it, and I just remember hearing something go, and that was about all there was to it. And when I come to, I was in the hospital, and they had my head in a harness and had a bunch of weight on my feet, and they had me stretched out. I think I must have been 7 foot long. But they said they straightened out my spine and everything, and what all they did, they said that, I guess what I found out later on, that it had broke my tailbone, and they had pumped steroids, and they told me that it was dum-dum. Yeah, which would, of course, it couldn't have been dum-dum, but they said they put some dum-dum around the tailbone and lower back. But anyway, that it wasn't just after that, just a little bit, I got orders to go to Camp Adair, Oregon.
And that was because when, as a crew chief?
I thought I was going to go as a crew chief on 102s.
Right.
And I found out that me and 81 other guys that was in that same group, we all got sent to Camp Adair, and we wound up we was in civil engineers, some of them was in civil engineers, some of them was in firefighting, some of them was in supply.
And you think they sent you out there because of the reading disability?
Well, that was my reason. That's what I was told.
Right.
And because they got me off the flight line when they found out that I had a form of dyslexia. And so we all got sent to Camp Adair, or we went to Camp Adair. I guess, of course, it wasn't just everybody from Amarillo. There was people coming in there from all over, different bases. And I guess they was just cleaning house. And we got sent to Camp Adair. And that's when, Lord, I was going to write my congressman, and I was going to do all this stuff and everything that I would really put out, because that's the reason I joined the Air Force, is to work on the flight line and be
right.
on aircraft. And I was willing to do anything just to be on the flight line. I mean, I would have swept the runway if it would have helped. But anyway, they sent us up there at Camp Adair, and the base wasn't even built yet. It was still in construction. It was not actually a base. It was called a station, Camp Adair Air Station, 25th Air Division, Camp Adair, Oregon. And they didn't have nothing for us to do, so we worked like a bunch of laborers. And there's guys that had come in there. They was most of them was A&E mechanics, some of them was airframe people, and different career fields. And they had us working for the farmers around there.
Cleaning out the poison ivy and all
Yeah,
that.
cleaning out poison ivy. They built a park of a thing down there for the air station down there in a swamp, more or less. And I remember we had to go in there and cut trees and pull all that poison ivy out of the trees and stuff. And we all got eat up with poison ivy, and where we took our clothes to have them laundered, they got eat up with poison ivy. Because when we went into the laundry, we had to take our fatigues, because in there to have the laundry to do them. And I never will forget the time we went in there in that laundry, we carried our fatigues in there, and all of their people were standing there, and they had their face covered in calamine lotion, their arms and everything. And they made us take our clothes and put them in a vat, like a wash tub full of water. Had some kind of a chemical in it. And we had to, they wouldn't even take our clothes till we put them in that vat, and then they'd take the clothes in there and they'd launder them. And they all got covered in poison oak.
Was it poison oak or poison ivy?
Poison ivy, or poison oak, really is what it was, poison oak. And everybody had poison oak. God, we all covered down with it. And old Tex Hamby, or not Tex Hamby, Tex, he was a little guy, he got it in his lungs, because we piled it and we burned it. And he got poison ivy in his lungs because he was breathing the smoke.
Right.
And Tom Strait, he wound up in the hospital from poison oak. And Andy, I think he was down there. And I was covered in it, but I wasn't bad enough to spend no time in the hospital. And we all, you know, dating girls and stuff like that. And even our girlfriends, they got poison ivy off the seat of our cars. And I think Tex, his wife come down with poison ivy or poison oak or whatever it was. And anyway, then it was finally, they put us to work, or the base got built, and we actually moved on base because we was having to live in town. And I moved into the barracks, and then they put me to work as a heating specialist. And I got to go as a 3-level heating specialist, I guess because we had already had tech school. And I was a 3-level heating specialist, and I didn't even know what a boiler looked like. But I had a 3-level, so they put me in the boiler plant, and I actually wound up taking over the boiler plant and running it. We had a civilian there running it, and then when we come in there, he taught us how to run it, what to do, or taught me, because I was the only one. And I wound up running the boiler room.
What kind of boilers were those? You said they were
They
marine?
were Scotch Marine boilers. There was 3 of them. One was working, one was on standby. In other words, it had pressure up on it, but it wasn't on high fire. And then they had one in wet storage. And wet storage means that it was filled up full of water and chemicals and everything. And in other words, it was kind of what you call pickled, I guess.
Just waiting to light the fire.
Yeah, and every so often, after a week or so, we would bring the standby boiler up online. I'd get it up and get it supplying the steam. I'd take the working boiler, I'd put it down and put it in wet storage. And the other one that was in wet storage, there was 3 of them, they were side by side. And one that was in storage, I'd bring the fire up on it, drain the water down, get it down to the water level that it was supposed to be. And then I'd bring it up on line and get pressure built on it, and then it went on standby. And then in a week or a couple of weeks, whenever I was told, then we would shift and do the whole thing again and move them. and that way it kept them all at about the same time on them. And ever so often, when we put one in wet storage, that was really the only time you could ever actually get in the firebox, that it would cool down enough to get into the firebox. And you'd have to go in there and wire brush that firebox, that whole firebox, with these real stiff, bristled wire brushes, and clean all that old soot out of them. You'd have to clean the flues out, and punch the tubes, and I got pretty good at punching the tubes. I used to know exactly how many tubes each boiler had, but anyway, I did that, and got one day they went to work and they told me I was being sent up to Mount Hebo.
Oh, they had an alert or something, or they actually had a drill where they actually shut down the
Oh, yeah, they had drill. I mean, they had drills all the time. And that's when
they brought your boilers up.
And when the boiler I had on line jumped off the line, and the reason it actually went down on low water, which shut it down. So the reason it went down on low water is because I had too much caustic soda in the boiler, and all of the water went to a foam, and it went into the main steam line.
Still vaporizing into the steam.
Shut everything down, and I thought that was really going to get me in serious trouble, and it was an hour or so before I was able to get number 2 or standby boiler, get it you make sure it got up and got it running, and get the condensation drained on the steam header, which I had to drop the pressure on everything to get it drained out. And then when the steam come in there, it started doing a lot of hammering and water hammering and jumping around. It sounded like the damn building was fixing to come apart. But anyway, I got it up and got it back online and got things going.
This is at the blockhouse, wasn't it?
That was at the blockhouse. The 3-story building with 3-foot walls, supposed to have been.
What was that building for?
That was where all the computers were. It was an environmental control building.
Yeah, it was a data center.
It was the same thing just like you had over there, but it was all computers. I mean, those big frame computers.
Right.
They,
it was a 50-year-old version.
Well, like I said, it was probably some of the first computers that ever come out. Because I've been told that a laptop had more computer power than that whole building had.
Right.
And that building was actually, what was it, was City Block.
Yeah.
And anyway, you can go see it on the internet. I mean, you look at Campadera and see the building, how big it is.
So did you say there was an insurance guy that came in there that kind of bailed you out?
Well, the insurance guy was a civilian, and he was, they had the insurance on the boiler. And apparently this guy had took a real liking to me because he treated me, you know, real nice, and I was scared because I knew that I was fixing to get axed or something because I had lost the boiler online.
Right.
And he found out what caused it, and it was me putting too much caustic soda in the boiler water. You had to run a test on the water, and you had to put so much tanning in it, and so much potash, and all these different chemicals, soda, ash, everything else there. It had about, I don't think, about 3 or 4 different things that I used to put in the chemical injector and then inject it into the steam or into the boiler water. And I'd run a test every day on it, but I wasn't doing the test just exactly like I was supposed to, because I worked on the theory. It's a little bit good, a whole lot's better. And I would just go, when I put my chemicals in there, I just, you know, throw a handful of little extra in there every time, just kind of top it off.
For the caustic soda?
And you don't do that with caustic soda, because caustic soda's everything will work fine to a certain point, and once it gets a saturation point, it goes ballistic, and it just all of a sudden, just in a split second, it just turns to foam. And that, anyway, he more or less, I guess you'd say he said he took the blame, or got me out of trouble, said that for me not to worry about it, he'd take care of it. And so that was all wrote off, and it wasn't my problem. And
who was it that came through on inspection when you were coming out of the boiler cleaning it?
oh, that was the colonel. Damn it, he had just received the Legion of Merit. Colonel Gray, Leon W. Gray, and they had an alert, and I had been in the firebox working, scrubbing the firebox. That was a job that I took on. I wouldn't ask nobody else to do it, because I wouldn't ask nobody to go in the firebox to scrub it. And I did it, and I was black from head to foot, and I did have a mask on, and whenever I crawled out of the firebox, I took the mask off, and that was the only white thing on me, was right around my mouth. And when I did, we was on alert, and when the alert went off, well, I had to scramble and get out of the firebox, and I was standing there, and he walked in, and I went to attention, and there I was, just as black as the ace of spades, and the only hanging white was right around my mouth. I guess all you could see nothing but was teeth and eyeballs. And he wanted to know what my job was. He said, "What is your job, Airman?" I said, "Sir, these boilers are my responsibility. I'm the one that keeps them on the line, and I am cleaning the firebox." And he said, "How many of you are doing that?" And I said, "I'm the only one." I said, "These are my boilers." And he wanted to know who I was and everything like that. He really, being a horse's butt, he was really nice to me. But Colonel Gray was not noted to be a real easygoing colonel. He was a little bitty guy, full bird colonel.
Oh, Napoleon complex.
Yeah, I think he had kind of had an inferiority complex, and he would go to Portland to do his airtime, to get his time in. He flew. A lot of the officers flew, and they'd go to Portland to put their time in, and then they were stationed there at Camp Adair, and they would come back. And he would always whenever he would come back, they would bring him back in a helicopter. I remember they had a Husky helicopter, which they also used for firefighting. And it was a twin rotor helicopter. And the first time I'd ever seen a Husky.
So he came in there, and after he talked to you?
After he talked to me, I guess he liked what I said, or I don't know what all it was, but things went real good. And that's when I was there at Camp Adair, and I went to Oregon. Went to Mount Eagle.
No, you went to the coast with Grandma and Mom.
I went to the coast with Grandma and Grandpa.
And me.
Mama.
And I was at night.
And
I was big pregnant with you.
Yeah, she was big pregnant with you. And
What was in March before he was born in April, in July?
We went by Mount Nebo, and I told Jerry, and I said, "You see that thing up there?" I said, "That's the most godforsaken place you can go to." And I said, "That's radar sight." And I said, "I sure would hate to be stationed there at that place."
Well, he was up there.
That was on Saturday morning, and it was Monday when I wasn't.
Well, the next week, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was Monday. and I got orders come out there, and they come in there and told me that I had orders. I said, where am I going? Where? He said, we're sending you to Mount Hebo. Lord, I like to die. There I was just talking about how bad I would hate to get stationed there, and
So we had to move all our stuff over to my grandma's place and move me back in with Mom and Dad.
and I loaded my bag up, and I went to Mount Hebo. And I went up there, and I was in charge of the heating side of CE.
We had to keep all those radar domes warm so the snow.
Oh yeah, we had to, all them radar domes had steam heaters in them, and we had to keep them. I mean, the steam stayed on all the time, even in the summertime when there wasn't snow and when there was snow. And we kept them heaters on. It couldn't get too hot for them. But they went real good up there at Mount Hebo. I made rank.
Yeah, they put you originally in a isolated dorm?
Well, no, when I got there, I had a choice. I could, go wherever I wanted to stay. And we had those, what they call Quonset huts. And they was metal huts that was half moon shaped. And on their little they had chain link fence stretched over the top of them. And it was poured in concrete. And that chain link fence was the whole building on top of the mountain. Yeah, everything up there was chained down. And we had great big culverts that run from building to building. And went from, like that down there where the radar antennas were, we had these great big culverts. They just, big culverts just like you see along the side of a road for a river that runs under the highway. And it was all put together, and they run from building to building, because when the snow would get so deep, everybody walked through them things, and they had sidewalks in them, and they walked in. That's where you go to building. You could come out of my barracks and go all the way down to the 24 tower, and there would actually be outside. You'd see in those cupboards.
Right.
And the way we got around, and we were real relaxed up there too. And a lot of times I'd go to work in blue jeans and a long sleeve shirt. I mean, I wouldn't even be in uniform.
Right.
And as long as we did our job, we had a commander. Let me think what his name was. I know it as well as I know my own. Robinson, Major Robinson. He was a major, and he was base commander. And he was one smooth cat. He was good. And he would let us do anything we wanted to do as long as we got our job done.
Right.
And I guess I could have went out there and worked in a bathing suit, I guess, and shower clogs, and probably wouldn't have said anything as long as we got our job done. But very seldom that I would, not very seldom. Every once in a while I'd wear blue jeans or something like that, but most of the time I wore fatigues and and then the Air Force didn't have name tags on their uniform. You had a little tag that you wore on there. And I went and got me some of that wide webbing.
Oh, Donna, take care of it.
Stenciled my name with one of them stencils and spray painted and made my own name tag. And I sewed on the uniform. And I had more people ask me, how did I get that, And I told them I made them out of supply. And darn it, the other guys didn't start doing that. And I always said I thought that might have been the thing that.
Well, your duffel bag, your blue duffel bag used to have a stencil on it.
Yeah.
Was that one of the stencils that you did?
Remember those stencils that I made and had my name stenciled on them? And it was a white stencil, it was a white piece of that tape. And you didn't have U.S. Air Force on them or anything like that. And but you just had that little name tag on your shirt. It was on this side your name tag was. And you just had that little name tag. Well, I didn't like that name tag pinned on the shirt all the time. And there for a while it was a little leather name tag that hung on your button that had a piece of paper with your name on it. And I made those stencils. I put some of that webbing. And it was webbing like they used to tie stuff down with. It's just that wide white webbing, almost like a belt.
Right.
And I cut that off the length, and I got me one of them stamping machines that stamps your name out of a piece of cardboard and laid it over that stenciling, and then took black spray painted. Well, what it did is sprayed my name on that deal. And then I had those, and I think maybe you sold them on there for me, didn't you? Yeah, she sold them on my fatigues, my name, Wyatt. And people got to ask me, where did I get those at? And I told them I'd made them, and that's how I did it. Next thing you know, you start seeing other guys coming out there, and they all that. And I always said, man, I might have been the one that got that name tag started. I
might have been.
But, of course, that's the only kind of name tag we had.
It was that bulbing stuff that looked like ducking.
Yeah. And I also wore a Army fatigue hat. I never will forget that. It was one of those that was round on top and had a wire in it. And it was a regular fatigue hat, but it was the type that the Army wore. And it had
a bucket.
Yeah, it was flat on top, and I mean, it was a good looking one. But you ever look at any pictures and see any pictures of old Army guys out there on those nuclear sites and where they're popping nuclear bombs off and everything and running, and they got them fatigue hats on with that, had a wire in the top of them, and it made the top of them look just flat. And I started wearing that thing. I don't know where I got it at. And I wore that, and I also wore I had a pair of overalls, green colored overalls. And I wore that sometimes, and people will tell me, I've always come up with something different, you know. And those overalls made it nice. I mean, you know, that they regular our military coveralls, Army mostly. And I just hated the damn old fatigues that the Air Force had, the big lady things. God, their legs on so big you could put both feet in one side.
Right.
Especially if everything, put some helium in them, you could fly.
Yeah, out there where the wind blew, that could blow up one
leg, certain leg, and come out the other side, and it was cold. And I started wearing that, and I also started wearing those high lace-up boots, like paratrooper boots.
Right.
And
kind of a little bit Heinz Pizza 7 variety be going to.
Yeah, I kind of had my own variety, and a lot of people would copy it. And when we would get time off or nothing to do, we'd go over to Spy, and we had a bobsled over, and we used to check that thing out and ride it down the mountain. And we'd do that, and then they would bring the mail up on the mountain with a weasel. They had a weasel, a snow weasel. And we would ride down the mountain, and then when the mail would come up the mountain, we had a rope we tied on the back and get on the sled, and he'd pull it, take us all the way back. But that road was 8 miles and 2/10 long and had 132 curves.
Yeah, I saw that last night on that picture.
And man, I tell you what, I'd get down there at Mount Hebo and get drunk and couldn't see the road. And I'd drive back top of that mountain, and I'd open the door on my car and find the line. It had a line, and of course, if the snow wasn't on the road or anything, I mean, you went down the mountain, there wasn't no snow on the road, you could drive, down. And I would follow that line, and sometimes I would lose it. And I'd go back and forth till I hear gravel, and then I'd turn this way, and I'd go back till I hear gravel. Trying to find that line. One side is, Lord, you're talking about
Being lucky.
Oh, man, Lord's looking after us.
So you didn't like the Quonset hut though, right? And you wound up moving into the
Yeah, I was in that Quonset hut, and I was about to go nuts in there because
cabin fever.
Well, I would go in there and there wasn't nobody there. I mean, I was in a room by myself.
Dean Wyatt with nobody to talk to.
Yeah, and,
Give you
I had-
the worst punishment.
I asked Sergeant Dorsey, and I said, can I get someplace else? And he said, well, all we have is the open bay barracks. And he said, ain't nobody likes that open bay barracks. And I said, why is that? He said, well, it's just, you know, great big room. You got your bunk and your wall locker and all that stuff. It actually 2 rooms, but the back is a long building, concrete building. And it had the bathrooms in the center. And, anyway, I told him, I said, that suits me fine. And, he said, okay, and he also made me, the guys that was in there was, a lot of that would actually stay in the blockhouse was a lot of, some of the transits that was coming through, or the special people that they brought up there maybe to check out some radar or something like that,
Right.
over the transits. They would stay in the blockhouse, and a lot of the radar operators was in there. And in fact, I think I might have been the only person that was in civil engineers that stayed in
The blockhouse, you mean the open bay barracks?
Yeah.
Called the
Called the
blockhouse?
blockhouse.
Okay.
And, so anyway, he moved me into the, or he said I could move into the blockhouse. It was Sergeant Dorsey, my first sergeant. And I moved in there and set up housekeeping, and, he wound up making me the barracks chief. In other words, I was one that signed details to people that was there.
Airman in charge over that barracks?
Yeah, and, which was a good job. I had a couple of blacks now that give me a hard time, but I had one friend that was a black, and he kept me from getting cut one night. That, made him, I popped off with one guy, and we kind of got into it, and he was fixing it. He was going to cut me. And I started backing up. I said, man, you better think about what you're doing. I was scared of it. And I was backing up, and when I was backing into the bathroom, and he was backing me up. And when I went through the door, I went back, and just as he stepped through the door, this friend of mine that was a black guy, hit him right between the eyes, as hard as it did. And he went one way, and the knife went the other. And I remember telling you, I told you about that.
Yeah, you did.
And, he wound up working for me over in the shops and everything. And, I always give him good jobs
Good duty.
to do.
Right.
But, he took care of me. He told me, he said, and I said, I went by the name of Pockets. And, he told me, he said, Pockets, ain't nobody gonna mess with you.
He says if he messages you, you let me know.
And, he was my bodyguard.
Now, you had a run-in with somebody at a bar once.
That was that black guy.
No, that was that kid from Brooklyn, New York.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the black guy that you busted with the
Coffee mug.
coffee mug.
Well, that was in Amarillo, though. That wasn't in Hebo. That was in Amarillo. No, that was, Scott, Airman Scott. He, told me he'd been my old man, but my old lady didn't have change for a quarter. And man, I just come unwrapped.
That wasn't the wrong stuff.
No. I hit him in the mouth with that coffee cup, and I went to work on him. And the first sergeant took me off, got me off him, and stood me against the wall, and I was fighting him. My NCOIC was there with me. He was a master sergeant. He saved my bacon. But he told me, he heard Scott tell me that. And me and Scott had been having trouble the whole time I was there anyway.
Right.
He was working in the orderly room. And he told me when I got there, he said, I don't want to see that you get red line and get busted. And I said, you leave me alone. I ain't got no part. Because he knew I was from Little Rock.
Right.
And we had several words. And but anyway, They took me down there and locked me up for a little while. Scared me to death. I thought I was going to jail. Probably the best thing. Then when I went to have my say-so, it was Black Colonel that I had to go before. And I knew right then I was going to jail, boy, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. He knew where I was from, and he told me that the Air Force didn't need no publicity because the Navy was having a lot of problems.
Whatever happened to that guy? You ever seen him again?
Never seen him again. He was still there because when I went to Oregon, Don Lindbergh later on went in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Amarillo,
right,
in the 43rd Squadron, same squadron that I was in. And I asked him if Airman Scott was still there, or Scott there. And of course, I had told him at one time what had happened. He said, yeah, he was still there. He said, you could see the scars on his face where I hit him with that coffee cup. And so, I got in trouble with the very first day I went to basic training. And my PI was black. My lieutenant was black. My flight commander was black. 80 guys in our outfit were 65 were black and 15 was white. 65 black guys was Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland. The 15 white guys was Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and Texas.
That was about the worst. That was the worst combination you could have right there.
And we was Flight 2, and Flight 1 was organized the same time we were, and they was all white.
Right.
And we was 65 blacks and 15 white. And they named us the African Queen. But I tell you what, we could march. That's one thing we could do.
Had rhythm.
And when we come down through there, I mean, we come and you could tell us from everybody else. Nobody marched like we couldn't do nothing else. Firing range, that was a joke, man. The only one that had ever shot a gun was the white guys. The black guys didn't know which end of the gun to put to the shoulder. I mean, it was pitiful. And, of course, we was the flight commander, the flag bearer, the element leaders and everything was all black. Everybody was. And, white guys, we was pretty much in the same row.
Right.
Everybody said me and Ben wasn't nothing alike. That he couldn't believe that we was brothers.
Where was this at?
That was up on Nuclear 1.
Up there in Illinois?
No, this was up there in Russellville.
That's Nuclear 1?
Yeah. Nuclear 1 and 2.
I didn't know Ben worked on that too.
Yeah. He worked on it. He worked on it in a short time. I was up there altogether about 10 times. But, Ben was up there. He was working over on the Nuclear 2 side. And when I first went up there, I was working on the Nuclear 1 side. They was getting it ready to start. And that's when I had to have my thyroid taken out, and they had to give me that radiation for my thyroid. And I couldn't go back over to Nuclear 1 because all the sensors was then over there.
Mm-hmm.
I set the sensors off. And so they made me transfer over to Nuclear 2.
Right.
Yeah. I worked on Nuclear 2 off and on. I did everything in the world up there and wound up, was on the heavy rigging crew. We did all the heavy rigging, setting those steam generators. It was like 800 tons. And we had to move those things around and set them, get them lined up. And
how many of those steam generators are on those things?
There's 2 on each reactor. You got a reactor that sits in the middle, and then you got a steam generator that sits on each side of it. And the water from the reactor is pumped out, the hot water is pumped out of the reactor over into the steam generator, and it heats the water that's in the generator that creates the steam that runs the turbines.
Right, and that water never escapes though, right?
No, that water, the only thing it does, it just circulates back and forth between the reactor and the steam, and the inside, or the inside, that generator is built like a boiler, and where you have water in the tubes and fire around the tubes, this has hot water in the tubes and water around the outside of the tubes. And that water is so hot coming off that reactor that it actually heats this water up in that
More than just steam.
side. But see, the water that's in the tubes is radioactive.
Right.
The water that's on the outside of the tubes are not, and that's where the steam is actually generated, and it goes from there all the way across the building, out of the containment building over to the turbine floor. And that's what runs the steam that runs the generators, the turbines.
How do they cool the water down? That's the radioactive.
There's a big condenser in there that there's a great big radiator, basically about what it boils down to. On nuclear one, the cools the water down is the water in the Arkansas River. They pump it through the condenser and everything, and then back out in the river. On unit 2, it's pumped through the condenser, and then out of the condenser it goes up through that cooling tower.
Right, that's that steam you see when you drive in.
Yeah, that's the steam, and that's where that cools that water down. But see, that water, all that water that's on the river side and on the water tower, or the cooling tower, that's not radioactive.
Right.
It's real hot water, but they're moving so much river water to it that it blends into it. And that one guy, when I worked that last shutdown up there on Nuclear 1, the guy that worked for AT&L, that was over us, that's what his job was when the reactor was up and running, was over the fish kill. They had to keep track of the fish that died. Right. Where that water, that hot water would go out into the river. And that's when we cut that line in two that was radioactive and set all them alarms off and everything else. And I got PO'd and asked him, "Man, what do you do when this thing's operating?" He said he was over the fish kill. He told me what he got. I said, "And they got you in here telling us what lines are safe and what lines are not safe, because the line that we cut in two was supposed to have been clean. And when we cut that line, that water sprayed out of there, it set the damn alarms off and everything. And it sprayed us down and everything, and they made us go in and take them showers, took our clothes off from us and everything. And,
right.
And I got a new pair of boots out of it and some clothes. They had to replace them. They took them clothes and shoes, and I had a set of Red Wing boots that was pretty new. All that went to one of these nuclear dumps. And I guess they'll dig them up sometime 1,000 years from now and check the DNA on them clothes, and that'd be mine. But me and Jerry Grinder and a bunch of us got sprayed down with that water. And you didn't know that it was hot, but I mean, the alarm systems around there, there are alarms everywhere. And when that water comes out of there and hits the air, well, I mean, them alarms go off.
Okay.
And of course, we had these little badges that we wore on our shirt to count the millirankings.
Right.
That we got.
Millirads.
Yeah, millirads or whatever they call them, but I know mine would always be pegged out at the end of the day. And when I would go in, put mine up on the board next morning, I'd come in here, get it off there and put it on, and it'd be back in the safe range. So, They didn't care what we did, as long as that reactor got to going. When that reactor was shut down, money was not coming in. And they wouldn't leave it shut down very long.
You ever hear about any of those guys getting cancer?
Yeah, a bunch of them. Yeah. It was either from that or from that,
Asbestos?
well, no, over at that chemical plant over at Jacksonville, at Burtech. There was,
Or that where they made the Agent Orange?
yeah, there was, the 4 of the 6 that was in that crew, 4 of them died from leukemia. And, me and
Langford, there's a Robert Langford.
Robert Langford.
Was he one of those?
Well, no, he was over there, but he was in a different crew than what I was in.
Yeah.
The crew that I was in, there were 6 of us. And me and Bobby Matthews are the only 2 that still.
You know, Robert Langford died in the 70s of leukemia.
Leukemia, yeah. Died in 75. Yeah.
He was young. He was 35 years old, about that.
No, let's see. See, Robert had been in the Air Force about, well, he might have been, see, I had joined the Guard, and I was trying to get him, he was wanting to get into the Guard, and he got a bad discharge from the Air Force. And I was trying to get the paperwork done where he could join the Guard. That was in 75. And he died before I got the paperwork finished up. But he got washed down with that stuff back in 64 and 65.
The Agent Orange stuff?
Yeah. That's when we was over at Jacksonville, and it was called Hercules Power Plant. And Hercules kept it so long, and then they sold out, and Vertec got it.
That's
All the
Monsanto
chemical
now.
companies, they changed hands, changed names, and you
Right.
know, to cover up a lot of stuff. It's kind of like that Love Canal thing up there in New York, you know, where they had all that chemical plant up there, and it was so contaminated, and they built a housing project in there in the middle of that contaminated soil, and
Right.
all the people in that housing project there's a whole subdivision they built in this area where they dumped all that waste, all that chemical plant. And the people that moved into the subdivision, they got to coming down with cancer and everything. Kids was coming down with it. And that's when that deal was called the Love Canal. That's when the lid blew off that thing, and the government wound up having to go in there and buy all them places back and settle up with the people. And there was a lot of lawsuits and everything, you know. And they went in there and tore everything out of there, all the houses and everything, cleaned the land off and everything. And now it's nothing. But and of course, that Love Canal, the people that originally polluted it sold the company to some other company, and they had it so long, and then they sold it to somebody. So they did a lot of that back in those days, and you know, they passed the blame over to somebody else, and any time they get through with everything, you don't know who to sue or who's.
And as soon as some bad news would come out, they'd sell the company real quick for a chance to get.
That same way you like asbestos. They knew back in the 1800s that asbestos was a killer, but the company in Canada kept making it, and then they would sell out to somebody else, and somebody else would take it and run the business so long, and then they would sell out, and then when they finally got everything come out about all these people coming down with asbestosis, well, then that's when they shut everything down, and they come up with that big lawsuit. Now all them billions of dollars they've got set back. They made them set back so that when people come up with asbestosis, they get a settlement out of it.
Right.
And
And you told every doctor that you've been exposed to
I've been
asbestos?
checked for it, I've had all the x-rays done, I've had everything done to my lungs, and I don't show it. And I used to have that stuff, so much of it in my head whenever I'd come home. When I was up at Russellville, I would be in that asbestos, and we would take and I'd blow my nose and look like I blew a wad of cotton out of my head. And I don't know what in the world kept you and Mike and Mom from getting it, because it was on my clothes. And a lot of people brought it home with them, you know,
Right.
not knowing. And they all got big settlements out of it. And the lawyers called me and had me go down to Little Rock. They had a setup down there, and I had to go down there and take a bunch of x-rays and everything. They don't show up. And like I said, your body accepts it or it rejects it.
Yeah,
And I've always been lucky.
that's a God thing right there.
But the thing is, as a rule, it don't show up until you get up in your senior years. That's when it usually shows up, and that's what I think they're kind of looking for now, because I've got a place on my lung that they have been keeping track of now for about 30 years.
And they have documentation to show that you actually were exposed to that.
Oh, yeah. But there's a spot on my lung. It's actually behind my lung, between my lung and the heart. And where it's at, they said they couldn't do nothing about it if it did become malignant. But they've watched it over all these years. And they keep taking pictures of it, and it hadn't changed or anything. It's just a dark spot there. Something's there, and they don't know what it is. But they keep watching for it to see if it's going to, because Dr. Wellens knew about it, and when he first found out about it, he'd x-rayed my lung, and it showed up in that x-ray, and they got all excited. And they had me go out to the air base and get the films of my lungs that the Air Force took.
Right.
And I had to carry them down there, and they matched them with the film and all this stuff, and it's always the same, and it hadn't grown in you or not. It's just like I think it might be a piece of metal that I've got in me. You know, there's been people especially the people that was in places, you know, like in the war, and, you know, bomb fragments, have actually got them in them, and they never even knew it. That one guy that had that nail in his head, that had that framing hammer, fell off the ladder, and had the framing gun, shoots him 16 penny nails. He fell off the ladder and hit the ground, and when he hit the ground with the gun went off, but they never could find the nail that he shot. He knew the gun had fired.
Right.
But they never could find it. And it was something like 6 months later, this guy got to get these damn headaches. And they went in and x-rayed his head, and in his brain was this nail. And when it went through, there was such a velocity, it just made a little bitty hole, and he just thought it was a skin place on his head. And it showed his skull, and that 16 penny nail was sticking down, was in his skull, in his brain. And where it was at, they couldn't remove it, and they left it in there. And that was causing him to have headaches, and he didn't know what it was, and so they x-rayed him. That was on the news. They had on them industrial accidents and stuff like that shows on those.
Whatever become of the guy?
Yeah.
Whatever become of it?
He's still living and got it. Got that
Still
nail. But he
have
never
it.
knew he had that nail in his head. And when that gun went off, it shot that nail into his skull. But it never did, I don't get bled or anything else. And where his skull was, his brain, that nail was sticking through that thing like where it went in. And it showed, and it was about that far, the end of the nail was about that far under the scalp. And so it was sticking through, almost completely through his brain. And he never knew it until after about 6 months, they said he started getting headaches. And they went in and they x-rayed him, and they seen that nail in there. And then they got to trace him back, and that's where the nail come from when he fell off the ladder.
Right.
But there's a lot of guys that coming back from over in Iraq and them where they those IEDs go off, and then, they put ball bearings and nails and everything else in it.
They have a skin mark on their arm and don't think nothing about
And
it.
they just get a little sore on their arm, and then they go in there and there's a nail or a ball bearing that's inside there, and, it just made just a little scratch place on their arm, and looked like that's all there is to it. Well, that's kind of like, that's what, so I say that might be what's in behind my lung is,
You've been around construction all your life.
yeah. And, I got shot in the foot by that .45 caliber, stud thing that they shoot these steel beams with.
Oh, yeah.
That, I was working down there at that Cumberland City church, and they had me in there threading pipe, and it was 6-inch pipe, and I had a big old ratchet die. I remember that thing was as big as, it was a kitchen sink, that die. And they had this pipe in the vise there, and it was 6 inches in diameter, and I put that ratchet thing up there on there and got it all bolted down. And it had a ratchet deal there that you work, and as you ratchet that thing, it make that die turn real slow, and it would cut a thread on that pipe, just like you thread a piece of pipe.
Right.
And I was standing on a piece of plywood, a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and had the ratchet thing, and I was doing down like this here, bending over. And them ladders, there was the ceiling people that was in there that, where they shoot this, they put up this wire screen, and then they put concrete over it and make a ceiling. It's called a lab. And they was working up on top there, and they had that .45 caliber stud gun, and they had those steel beams that church was built out of, and they would shoot them steel beams with them, that
Stud gun.
stud gun, and it would leave a nail stuck through that deal, and they would hook the wire on that nail and come down, and they'd hold up the rebar that was holding that ceiling.
Right.
And I was working there, ratcheting that die like that, and they was up there, you could hear them bam, bam, and every once in a while they'd ricochet. And when I went to move my foot, my damn right foot wouldn't move. And I got looking down at my foot, and I could see the blood all over the plywood, and that nail, apparently whenever I had just straightened up, it come right down in front of me and went through the side of my shoe right there and just skinned my foot there a little bit and drove and stuck that nail my foot to the floor on that plywood.
You didn't even notice it.
I didn't know it until I looked and seen the blood, coming out from my shoe. And I thought, well, then, of course, then it got hurt,
Right.
after I seen it.
We
But
were
that was so funny about it.
Because that actually, you just leaned up just in time and it
I
went right
was just raised up, I'd been bent over, and it went right through the back of my shoulder, probably through my heart, or who knows what all. But it just happened to be, and of course, when that happened, I've seen what it was, and I had to pull the nail out to get my foot out of there. And I hollered at the guys, and they got up there, and so then they run everybody out of the building while they were shooting those nails in up there.
Right.
And really, they should have done that to start with, because even when we would be up there, a lot of times we had a 22. They shot a 22 caliber.
Yeah, I've shot
Ram
those
set.
before. That's actually at the other house when we did that wall in that third bay of the garage. Larry Tracy's mom's boyfriend, he brought one of those over, and we were shooting those metal trays that you use for your aluminum studs, the 22s into the concrete.
Well, we would, after that, of course, that .45 caliber, it would shoot a stud bolt about the size of my little finger.
Yeah.
And it'd be like maybe a half-inch stud or thing. And they would shoot that thing through those beams, those big steel beams, had the webbing about like that, probably a half-inch. Well, it would actually, shoot through that. And then they could hang that ceiling off those studs.
Right.
And so anyway, they come down and they checked me and everything, and I just had just a big scratch where it went through the side of my foot, the instep of my foot. And And apparently it happened just as I had straightened up, and I never knew it, because I was having to bend over and ratchet that thing.
Right.
Well, it took 30 minutes to thread a piece of pipe with that. Of course, since I was an apprentice, I was a low man on the totem pole. That's what they had me doing.
What year was that about?
That was, 1964.
That was another one of those God things right there, though.
Yeah, the guardian angel was working with me, because I had left Hercules, the chemical plant up there, and I went to work for Pfeiffer, plumbing and heating. And we was over at Cumberland City Church every day in Cumberland.
Right.
In Little Rock.
Now, when was it that you were working at the Titan II site?
That was when I was working at the Hercules plant.
Right.
I was supposed to go to Site 4 the next day, because I wanted to go because it was a journeyman. I get journeyman's pay, and I was an apprentice.
Right.
And we apprentices would go up there and draw journeyman's pay. And they told me that at Hercules that I wouldn't be coming back there, that they was sending me up to Site 4.
Right.
And then when I got home, got my clothes changed and everything else like that, I had a phone call, and they told me, they said, you gotta go back to Hercules tomorrow. I said, Charlie Dove is gonna take your place. He's a journeyman, and he got laid off, so he had priority.
Sure.
And he was going to Site 4, and it pissed me off. And I already had that journeyman's money at $4.44 an hour. I already had it spent, boy. I could see me making that big money, boy.
What year was this?
That was in 64.
Okay.
See, it's 64 or 65. No,
I'm starting to see that you had your guardian angel watching over you pretty close.
well, I had 3 close calls right there within, I'm going to say probably 4 months.
So the next day, this Charlie went in.
He went up to Site 4, and when he's on his orientation, where they take him through the missile silo and show them, where they're working at and what they're going to be doing, and he was at the very bottom, underneath the missile.
Right.
In the blast chamber. And that's where they found him when the thing blew up and
Sucked all the oxygen out of there.
well, it burnt, is what it did, and everybody suffocated. Because Ben was up there on the cleanup crew, and he went up there and he said when he went in there, you could see where the guys had been laying because it had settled. And found a lot of the guys around oxygen bottles. They was trying to get oxygen. See, when that thing blew up, they closed it up. They closed that silo up, and, people couldn't get out of it, because they were afraid the missile would blow up.
Right.
And what it was that the hydraulic line that they had cut, they had hit it with a welding
Welding.
had the guy was welding there, and apparently when he had put the rod in his holder and moved around the expansion joint, the flex stainless steel expansion joint that's under 2,000 or 3,000 pounds pressure.
Right.
He apparently hit that with that welding rod, and it popped a hole into it, and that hydraulic pressure had so much pressure on it that stuff just come out vaporized, and it just instantly caught fire. And it burnt.
So he died instantly, though.
Well, everybody, 53 guys died in that thing.
Yeah, but the guy that went at the welding rod, he would have died instantly.
Oh yeah, he probably got burned up right away. But that was up on the first floor. When you went into the missile silo, you went in on the 3rd floor.
Mm-hmm.
When you went into the gun barrel, you went in on the 3rd floor. And they went in on the 3rd floor, and everybody was working from the top floor all the way down, all the different levels.
And they had the missile still there?
Huh?
The missile was physically there when they did this?
Yeah, the missile was in there and had the warhead and everything on it.
Why would they do this work?
They was doing some kind of a modification or something like that.
Man, when I was in the Air Force, you weren't even allowed to head down that, if I went down that hallway and I turned right and was headed toward the missile, I would have been shot.
Well, they had the missile in there because when that thing caught fire, the business agent's son was on the 2nd level when it caught fire, and he was working as a painter. And he and his boss, which was a painter, got out. They went down level 3 and come out, and they was the only ones that got out of the silo. That's when they closed the doors up on it and locked it.
Right.
And, 'cause they had to suffocate the fire, 'cause the fire was really roaring, I guess. And they closed it up, and those guys suffocated.
So that, they knew when they closed that door that they were making a fatal decision on those 53
They
guys.
filled the place with smoke and everything so bad. But, that one up there at, Damascus, when it blew up, they was working on the missile when they dropped the socket
Right.
and knocked,
I remember that. We were sitting up there on the front porch and that big orange glow came up over there.
and that was, when they
That was
knocked the end off the
70.
oxidizer tank.
That was in 77, wasn't it, somewhere there?
I don't remember when it was, but it blew the warhead out there in the middle of one of the fields right there.
Pasture. Right.
Because they found the warhead, they said, and it was I think it was a MIRV.
It was the big one. Because those Titan IIs only have one warhead.
It was
It
only
was
one
the big
warhead.
Yes, it was the big warhead.
But
Big
anyway, they
swing
found
they had.
it laying out there in the field, because the guys that was listening to the radio, when they was up there, and they said, we found it out here in the field. And they, really got excited then,
Sure.
because they thought maybe the warhead disintegrated or something when the thing blew up, but it blew the end off from it, and it
I think it was actually close enough that we could see the glow. If that thing of war had actually detonated, it would have killed us.
Well, you can go up there at Painburn, and they got a monument up there. They're about not too far from where that missile was at.
How far is that from our house over there?
Oh, up there, probably 40 miles.
Well, we were able to see that glow from where we were.
No, the glow was from the one
At Damascus.
Damascus.
How far was Damascus?
Oh,
from
Damascus, that would be,
About
the way
15
the crow flies, probably 15 miles.
That sounds about right. Now, I know that one had the warhead actually detonated, it would have been fatal to us. But the other one, if it had gone off, it wouldn't have had effect.
Well, I had customers that lived up there in that area, and they come around and told everybody to go in their house, turn the air conditioners on, and close the house up, because that oxidizer had went all down through the valleys and everything like that.
Right.
And I think it killed some livestock.
I'm sure it did.
But they said people that was in the house, had one customer of mine that had a dairy over there. He said that the police come by and told them to, go in their house and stay, but a bunch of people, they evacuated them out of there, and they moved them everybody down to Conway.
Right.
And, but over at Martinville, which was where the crow flies, probably 4 miles from the silo, they told the people at one family that had a dairy, they told them to go in the house and close the house up and turn the air conditioner on. And that took care of that. They said you could smell it, oxidizer.
I'm sure.
There were several days you could smell it all around down those valleys and everything. But I think somebody lost quite a few cows up there last time.
Now, then you went up to Illinois, or was it Illinois that you had that one job where they drove down to the valley?
No, that was back in 78, 70, I guess it was about 78.
We were living out on the farm out there.
Yeah. And, see, they wanted me to go to Kansas as a superintendent.
But you were at Wyatt Enterprises at that time for that.
Well, I was working part-time.
Right. Well, 78, you were full-time then.
And I was still working at I worked at the construction up to 78 is when I quit, when I got laid off the paper mill.
Right.
That I went into business full-time. But I worked at, nights and weekends.
Yeah, I thought you started the business around 76.
73.
73.
Yeah. From 73 to 78 was when, but I was working there at that Conway bulk plant. I was general foreman on that job, and that company that put that, where they put in that no lead gasoline coming in. Well, we had to go in there and change up all that pumping station and headers and everything. And Joe Woodson, the business agent, sent me up there as general foreman. And, me and the superintendent got into it first rattle out of the box. And, he wasn't gonna put up with me. He wasn't gonna do this, he wasn't gonna do that, and I told him he did what he wanted to do to go on, but I had a job to do up there, and I was gonna do it my way, or we wasn't, or I'd just go to the Union Hall and let Joe deal with it. And he said, well, we'll try it your way. And that's where that, he told me that the men was going to do this, and he was going to do that, and everything, and I said, no. I said, I don't care how much coffee the guys stop and drink. I said, these men are all 21 years old, and I said, they're grown men, and I said, they'll give you a day's work for a day's pay. And of course, it was in the winter time, and it was cold.
Right.
And I said, when they get cold, but we was having to work out and around that tank farm and everything down there. And the wind was blowing, we had a little bisqueen. We'd take the scaffolds and put up a couple sections of scaffold, and we'd wrap it in bisqueen and make a place where they could work in there.
Right out of the
wind.
Right.
And I said, if they want to drink coffee, as long as they're, give you the work, I said, they can do it. And, me and him got into it. His name was Tommy Thompson. And he really breaking me over the cold. But anyway, he said, all right, we'll try it your way. And they had 3 jobs to do, the one in Fort Smith, Conway, and West Memphis. And I went ahead and run the job the way I wanted to run it. And we got so far ahead of the other 2 places, because the other 2 jobs were doing the same thing that we was doing. But it was all different locals. They was out of Fort Smith local, we was out of Little Rock local, and there was one that was out of West Memphis. And we got so far ahead that they told us to stop before they could do it, so the other crews could get caught up to where we were. Because when they shut that pipeline down, we all 3 had to, at these different places, had to go in there and change everything up. We've done all the fabrication, got everything fabricated, and then when they shut the pipeline down, because that pipeline is kind of like the power plant. If it ain't moving fuel to it, it's costing them money.
Right.
And boy, they don't shut that pipeline down very long for anything. They shut it down. Well, we go in there and we could take everything out. And we was 2 weeks ahead of everybody else. And they actually had us, told us that we could come out there and just sit down and not do nothing.
For 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks.
That'd been a long 2 weeks.
Well, it'd been long too, but we were on the payroll, I mean.
Right.
But, and I told them, well, this 2 weeks, I talked to that superintendent, and I said, what I want to do is I want to get with the motor crane people and get him to bring that motor crane out here and see how much of all this fabrication, this is all 12-inch pipe, and it was valves and T's and big headers and everything, all this put together. And of course, we had everything all up, put in there, measured by blueprint. I said, what I would like to do is get all this stuff put together and then see how far this crane can pick this up and see how far they can boom out with it and see if we can put this whole thing together and set the crane up so when we get ready to make the tie-in, all we got to do is bust the flanges off and set this header in there and get the 2 wells right, and that's through. And the superintendent said, no, I didn't want to do that. And I said, well, we got 2 weeks that we ain't got anything to do. And I said, I'd like to try that and see. He said, well, go ahead. So I got with the crane company. They come out there and told him, he said, well, we don't know. He said, there's a lot of tonnage there. And of course, there's a pretty good sized crane that was been bringing in. And he said, we'll try it. So I had the guys get out there. And they bolted all this thing together. And it was, boy, when they got through, it was a massive
chunk of metal, man.
A lot of pipe and valves and regulators and all that kind of stuff. And we got the cables on it. And we had him pick it up and boom it as far as he could before the rig got tipsy.
Right.
And whenever it started getting tipsy, well, then we backed up a little bit, and then I measured how far it was from that, from the load to where the crane was at, and I don't remember, something like 40-something feet. And so, and that was as close as you get, so we went over to where the thing was going to go in at, and measured from where it would be set in the back to see if there's a place enough there for the crane.
Right.
And sure enough, there was enough room there. And so that was good. He said, we can move it. We can set the crane here, then we'll be able to set that piece in there. Well, anyway, the superintendent, he just wasn't at all happy about it, but he said, well, you know, because I told him that I was going to run the job, and then make a damn what he wanted to do, because I was the one that made the decision. And I really put a lot on myself there, but because, I mean, the superintendent is really the one that calls the shots.
Yeah, it was his responsibility if it went bad.
Yeah, the general foreman is the one that actually gets the work done. Yeah, because I was a non-working general foreman. But anyway, when they shut the pipeline down, we had the crane sitting there. Old Slim went in there and he cut the piece of pipe out. And that was the only uh-oh that we had, is they were supposed to purge the pipe. And this pipe is down in the ground, like about 5 foot down in the ground. And then where it comes out, where the pigs come out that they put in the pipe to clean the pipe, the thing comes up and it goes out, and there's a piece that comes up above the ground, and that's where the end of it sticks out, and it was sticking towards that, the highway out there that run by Ward School Bus.
Right.
And they were supposed to have that line purged, and so I had Slim, I said, Slim, okay, I said, the line's been purged. I said, go down there and just pop a hole in that pipe, and let's make sure that it's been purged. And that pipe was open on the end. And he got down there with his torch and reached down that hole, and he took his cutting torch and he popped a hole in that pipe, and that thing blew up. And when it did, a ball of fire come up out of the ground and come out of the end of that thing, and went across that damn highway, and if there'd been a car on that highway, it would have got him.
Yeah.
Lucky would have it, there wasn't nothing on it. But anyway, that cleaned the pipe out.
Yeah, I bet it did.
And so, anyway.
And also cleaned some colons too.
So they got down there and they cut the pipe, took out the old piece. We hooked the crane up on that piece, and he swung it around, and they set it down in there, and they had the 2 wells to make, and that was it. And the other guys they was in there for I don't know how long, trying to get there, because they was putting it in there a piece at a time.
Right.
And anyway, we had ours in there and had it all welded out and inspected and tested, and everything was good. And then we just sat there and twiddled our thumbs until the people got there going. And anyway, the big boss that was with this company that I was working for was out of Tulsa. And he come down there, and he wanted to know would I stay with the company. He wanted me to go with the company as a piping superintendent. And I knew I wouldn't last at that, because I was the type that, as long as they did it my way, I'd go with it. The first time somebody bucked me about it, I'd tell them to stick it in their butt.
Right.
And he wanted me to come down there and want to know if I would stay with them. They had a job in Kansas they wanted me to go up there and do. And I told them, I said, no. I said, I'll finish this up, and I said, I'll lay myself off. He said, well, I'm going to go see the business agent, see if he can talk to you. And he went down and talked to Joe, and Joe told him, he said, Catfish said he wouldn't go. Said, he ain't going to go, and it ain't going to do no good for me to talk to him. He come back up to Conway there and wanted me to, now this was the main superintendent, or not the one that I had to run in with, but this was the main guy with the big company, the big boss, out of Tulsa. And see, they had their superintendent, and then this guy that I worked for, Tommy Thompson, he was the piping superintendent for this particular job. And that's what they wanted me to do, take that.
Take Tommy Thompson's
job.
Roll up the other job.
No, well, you know, he's still been there, but I would take the same kind of job that he had.
Same role at another location.
Yeah, they wanted me to go up to Kansas and do that pumping station up in Kansas.
Right.
And that's where the one that blew up and killed everybody in it.
And what was the story behind that?
Well, when the guys went up there, the first day of the job, when they went in there, they're supposed to do the work on the header, on the pumping station. They stopped at a little grocery store up on the side of a hill there.
Right.
And get their lunch packed. And everybody got their lunch packed, and then one guy was late getting there, so he told them go on ahead and he'd catch up with them. So the other guys all got in the company truck and they drove over to the pumping station. Well, the pumping station was down in a valley.
How big was the valley?
Well, it's pretty good size. I mean, it's
10 miles or 30 miles across?
Oh, it wasn't that big. I mean, it was probably just a low area in there, but it had to be, I didn't see it, but I just, heard about it. And I guess it was a pretty good area because they left, and the guy that got there late was having his lunch fixed for him at that store, and he just come out when he seen the guys in the car, in the company truck. It was all in that one truck. Went off, and he seen them. There was fog all down in there, and it looked like the clouds had settled down in that valley.
Right.
And it wasn't clouds, it was butane. It settled in there from that pumping station.
Right.
And when they drove off into it, they had already got off into it before they found out, realized what it was. And I guess something set it off, and they all burned up in it. And that guy that was late getting a sandwich, maybe was the only one to come out of it.
So that would have been one heck of an explosion, though, in that whole valley.
And it was.
The whole valley.
Well, it was a fire or something. But the guy that took my job, I don't know who he was, but the one that went ahead and took that superintendent's job was the one that
He was in that truck.
he was in the truck.
How'd that make you feel when it happened?
Well, made you think a lot.
Sure.
Maybe. You had things like that happen to him, and I had so damn many close calls. And I wouldn't dare say anything to Mom about it because she gets all tired.
As much as Mom worries.
She runs the wall. I had up there in Illinois, when the damn grinder got into my stomach, and, Neil Boone, the general foreman, told him, oh man, he was intestines slung all over pipes. I had one big old wire cut brushes, and I was buffing a piece of pipe there, and it jumped back and grabbed my shirt and jerked a hole in my shirt and grabbed my t-shirt and just pulled my t-shirt off from me.
Right.
With my shirt still on, And it scratched my stomach up a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it did.
But old Neil Boone, he was my general foreman. He come in and said, oh, catfish was down there and such a level, and he said that grinder got a hold of him and just cleaned his guts up and stowed them all over the pipe in there and everything, and he was taking up a donation for me. And I said, Neil, I said, hell, ain't nothing wrong with me. He said, I know, but I thought we'd take the money and go out and get drunk again.
Well, I'm curious, how much did they raise in the donation?
Oh, I don't know if he even got anything or not, but that was a joke around there because, everybody knew me, and everybody said, oh man, Catfish has done met his maker. Said they just pulled all his guts and everything out. And they all did all this and did all that and everything, and they'd all making a big, everybody laughing about it because I had to go up to the first aid shack and go up there and get cleaned up, and
Sure.
or get that wire brush, scratch my stomach.
Now, which job site was this at?
Huh?
Where was this at?
That was up there at Rock Island.
Rock Island, okay.
From that nuclear plant up there in Cordova. The one that I was on when we moved y'all up, my mom come up there.
Right.
But that was funny that could have been real serious. It could have been sure enough bad, but I was lucky, and it was just one of the things. Every time something like that happened, I wouldn't dare say anything to Mom about it or anything, because she gets so upset and gets on my case about it. So But that's all in the past now, so tell us more stories. But Ben never did do anything. I don't think it ever got. I think he got probably bit a couple of times from some high voltage, but shit, I backed up into a damn breaker panel with a bunch of building rods in my back pocket and stuck it in the bus bar of the breaker panel and knocked me off the top of the scaffold. That was out there at that Alcoa plant. And Gary Pack and what was that other guy named electrician? They was out there working. We'd all working out there for Southwest Mechanical, and we was working on the Alcoa plant where they get the mineral that they make aluminum out of. And I had a scaffold built up there. I was welding on a piece of pipe, and right behind me was a temporary breaker box, like a breaker box for a house or something. And it was for the temporary lights and everything around there. And what they done, they had took the screws out and they took the cover off of the box and put some wires and stuff in there, and they just put the cover back over and just put a couple of screws at the top. They didn't fasten the lid down real tight. And I'm here on the scaffold welding on the piece of pipe, and I'd take them welding rods and I'd stick them in the back pocket. You know, we didn't have a rod can then to put them in like they do now, but anyway, those welding rods are sticking out of my back pocket. And I'm down on that piece of pipe welding like this, and as I'm coming up that pipe, I'm raising myself up. And when it did, them rods in my back pocket were sticking out, and they slid up underneath that cover on that breaker box, right? And them rods stuck into the damn bus bar. And it shot right square. I come off that scaffold. I mean, I hit the ground, boy, and it burnt my butt pretty good back there. I got burned back there. But anyway, I don't know if you remember Gary Pack or not, but he's the one that landed that helicopter out there in the past.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. Well, that was when he was an electrician.
Right.
And he saved my bacon with that, and then he saved me down there on the telephone building from where I was trying to get the ground on the main bus bar. And I was scratching up around that bus bar and didn't know what it was. And it was where the main voltage comes in for that telephone company. It's several thousand volts. And I'm up there and it's got a plastic coating over those big copper bus bars, right? And I'm up there rubbing them with that welder or with that all-thread rod trying to get it ground. And Gary seen me and he hollered, "Catfish," he said, drop it, quit, get away." What the hell is wrong? Trying to get it ground because I had a scaffold, I had a pipe valve there, and I would stick that all-thread rod against a steel beam or anything and get it ground so I could make a weld, right? And I was out in the middle of the floor, and that big bus bar come overhead. It was in one of those green metal cabinets that was going across. They had little louvers underneath of it. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just a piece of ductwork, and I could get it ground off them. And that rod, it went up through them louvers, and then that bus bar is in there, and it's got a plastic coating over it. Those bus bars are like probably 6 inches tall, probably ½ inch wide, big copper bars for that main voltage to run that telephone company, right, coming in off the street. And anyway, when Gary hollered at me, he got me stopped. He said, "Man, if you'd ever rubbed through the deal," he said, "you would have got it ground." He said, it'd been history. And then the time I was down in the basement of that telephone building where the batteries were, they had those great old big submarine batteries down in that basement. These batteries stood about 6 or 8 foot tall and probably this wide and maybe that deep. They just had rows of them down there because that's what run all the telephones. And these bus bars went into deal, and somehow it's running through a charger or something. That's what changed it to AC to DC voltage. And this was all, I guess, a 24 volt something. It was all 24 volt, but it was probably, 7,000 or 8,000 amps.
Right.
And I had that piece of copper pipe over my shoulder, and I was walking down through those batteries. That guy's name was Frank, I remember that. And he done practically the same thing. He hollered at me, "Put that pipe down." Why? And of course I was whistling and walking down through there and swinging the pipe around, and I was going down through those batteries and bus bars all up on top there, like a grid.
If you hit with them bus bars, that'd be
He said, "Man, if I'd hit one of them bus bars with that copper pipe," he said, "I'd have been history." And he said, "From now on," and I was running some airlines down there in the back of this battery place. He said, he said, "I'll bring your pipe down here for you." And he said, "I'll bring it down here in the basement and I'll put it back there where you're working at. And you don't go nowhere with it." He said, "I'll bring all the pipe down here." And from then on, had a drawing on the wall there where they wanted all these little airlines to run and everything, and I had the telephone company didn't care how much it cost as long as it looked pretty. And I'd have to make all this, build all these little headers and everything out of copper and solder it and everything out. Then I had to take steel wool and polish the copper and then put hairspray on it, spray it all down with hairspray so it wouldn't tarnish. And I had to make quite a deal, and it was a good job. I mean, I was down there for several weeks just running that, doing that copper. And I would make the solder joints on the pipe, and then I'd take sand off, and I'd try to sand off all the solder that got out there. And then I'd take steel wool and I'd polish the copper to where it is shining. And then they'd bring me a can of hairspray, and I'd spray all the pipe down with that hairspray, which is blacker.
Right.
And that pipe to this day it's as pretty and shiny as it was. It's still down there. Of course, that's been 50 years.
Yeah, well, as long as it's sealed, it would be there.
But man, if I would have got that thing in those bus bars, and ain't no telling what would happen. But I tell you what, I had a guardian angel, and he was on overtime.
You said that there was 3 times that were just back to back to back. I mean, back in '64. So you told me about the one that's over at the Site 4. And I also, the one that's, what was the first one you was telling me about?
Well, the very first one was at the Hercules plant.
Right.
That's when the silo blew up.
Right.
And then from the working at the Hercules plant was when we was bust a line or something like that, it'd spray that stuff all over you. We'd have to jump in those vats around there, those cooling towers, and get the stuff washed off from us. And then the deal at the church where
that shot.
Yeah, where the thing shot my foot. And and in that deal at powder plant, like I said, there was Tex, AJ, or JD Longin, Tex Hanby, Dollins, and what's that other guy's name? I'm trying to think. Or what this other guy, this fourth guy's name, and then Bobby Matthews and myself. We was in a crew that we worked together.
Right.
And out of that crew, the 4 of them all died of
Leukemia.
And me and Bobby Matthews. And I seen Bobby Matthews about 3 years ago, and he's still in good health. I mean, he just got out of church and stuff there at the eating place there in McAllister's there in Conway. And the first time I seen him in probably 40 years. Yeah, he is in good health. I'm in good health. And everything is just old age catching
Just a lot of years.
Yeah. Well, you take back in 64, 65, well, I said 65, that would be,
You were 25 years old back then.
65 would be 65, 75, 85, 95, 105, 15, that's 50 years.
It's funny how you think about
Big
something.
Son was the other guy.
What was his name?
Big Son.
Big Son.
Yeah, that's what he went by.
It's funny how you think about things when you're younger, when you're 25, 30 years old, and it feels like it was a long time ago, but it's hard to believe that that was 50 years ago.
Yeah, and you know, also, you did things back then you didn't think about, you know, getting hurt or,
Oh, yeah.
and like, God, you're young, you're indestructible and everything. And you look back now, God, some of that stuff I wouldn't do now for nothing.
Yeah, a lot of it's, you know, we can't call it skill because, you know, we're just doing some dumb things, but, yeah, that was definitely a good Lord looking after you.
Well, it's, I mean, it just, you don't think about things like that. You know, at the end of the day, you say, man, that's a close one.
Right.
That's a close one. You know, look back now, God, man, it's a lot closer than I thought it was. That's like old Lanny Allner when we was kids. He had an old, 97 Winchester pump, 12 gauge shotgun, one of them that you can twist into and break down in two pieces. And we're down there hunting snakes, and he's got that shotgun, and he ejected it down, and he couldn't get the forearm to come back up.
Right.
And I'm standing there with my .22 and shooting snakes, and he's right here, and he's got that gun. And he's jerking up on that thing, and that thing was bad about a lot of time when you eject the shell into it and you pull it up, the thing would go off, the hammer would fall. And he finally pulled up, and they did, that thing was right down there, and that blast went up right there and pumped the side of my face where that blast come up, and it was that close. It singed the hair and
Yeah.
burnt.
Probably.
And I mean, if it been over an inch further, probably took my head off. And we laughed, we said, well, that's close.